Good afternoon and welcome to Go Live with Malcolm. The topic of today's live session is youth work and COVID-19. And to discuss this and enlighten us further, I have with me two stalwarts in the youth work field. I have Ms.Miriam Teuma and Prof.Brian Belton. I thank you both for accepting my invitation to be part of this live session. Go Live with Malcolm was born out of the COVID-19 pandemic as a reaction to reach out to young people through online platforms. We have dealt with various topics throughout these 22 weeks, but at the moment, since COVID cases seem to be on the rise once again, um, I felt it was the perfect opportunity to talk about the youth work profession during this pandemic. Just to introduce my guest today, I will start with Miss Miriam Teuma. She is both lecturer and youth worker by profession. She was responsible for modernizing ZAC in the 90s, and to this day, ZAC remains a youth organization that goes from strength to strength. For the past 10 years, Miriam has been the CEO of Malta's national youth agency, Agencia Zaza. At European level, she has represented Malta at the Council of Europe for many years, for which she held the position of chair at the Joint Council for Youth. Currently, she is the vice chair at the Steering Committee for Youth. Agencia Zaza hosted the European Union Youth Conference in 2017, when Malta assumed its first ever presidency of the EU. Miriam also lectures at the University of Malta, which is where I first met her while I was studying in my course in BA in Youth and Community Studies. Introducing Professor Brian Belton. Um, Professor Brian Belton is a lifelong West Ham United supporter. In fact, before we started this program, we were discussing a little the game between Birkirkar and West Ham, the two teams we both support. After professionally qualifying in youth work, he gained a doctorate from the University of Kent and was a former senior lecturer at the YMCA George Williams College in London. Belton has written many books, numerous articles, and papers, has spoken regularly at conferences, and has appeared on radio and television. Also, Professor Belton is a frequent visitor to our islands, where he was involved in our first ever detached youth work project, youth work supervision, as well as lectured many times at the University of Malta. So, we'll be trying to divide today's discussion into three parts. So first, we're going to try to look at what is youth work. We're going to look at young people's perception of youth work. And lastly, we're going to see how our practice was threatened by the pandemic and had to adapt to these new realities. So, Professor Belton, I'm going to start with you. You have experienced youth work in different nations around the globe, including China, Israel, Zambia, and the Falkland Islands. And I think clearly the definition of youth work varies from one context to another. So I will not ask you what you think the definition of youth work is. I will instead be asking you what are youth work's key characteristics that could be found in different settings.
Well, I think what we try to do is we try to focus on learning. Learning is different from education. Education is a structure, is a system. Learning happens inside someone, inside your brain. It's something that we can't always see, but that's what I think we try. That's our focus as youth workers. We focus on young people's learning. What learning about what? Broadly speaking, I think across the world, what I've worked on is the idea of social and political education. And what's that? Well, it's fostering creativity and inventiveness that's inherent in young people. I can't put that into them. It's already there. So why am I doing that? Because that's what they need in the future. The next century is going to need creative and inventive people, not people that do what they're told, not people that can read a set of rules and just follow them. Those days are finished. Like with the pandemic, what we've had to do is we've had to innovate. We've had to invent new ways of doing things. And this will continue. There'll be other challenges like that, the environment and what have you. So what we were aiming to do, what I've tried to do in my work and around the world is to get to work with young people to develop ideas and the means of taking responsibility for their own actions and dealing with the consequences of those actions. Very hard lessons. And to be able to, I think we were speaking before, Malcolm, to reflect on those things. How can I do this in a way that is better, or a way that I want it to be, rather than the way that it turned out? And this is about articulating thoughts and feelings. So the youth worker is working with young people, and it's not so much about the youth worker trying to do something to the young person. It is about working with that young person so they can articulate what they're thinking and what they're feeling. So a lot of our work is to deal with that idea of the young person becoming an adult. And I think we talk a lot in the youth work about transitions. And the first transition in life, one of the first transitions in life, is from youth to adult. Now, life is full of transitions. Youth and that to adult is just one, but it is the first one. So youth workers are working with people on this first transition. And we hope this will help them work with other transitions, when they move from school to work, when they move from work into marriage as parents, and then getting mortgages and all these transitions in life. The transition I'm going through in retirement, from being active in retirement. So we're dealing with this time of transition, the first one, the very first one. So the youth worker accompanies young people on this path, this first journey, and they facilitate learning and the excitement involved in this transition, not just all the tragedies and the problems, but the excitements and the adventure that these young peoples are on. So the youth worker can enrich the young person's transition and other transitions, because they're learning about transitions. Now, one of the things that was that people often talk about is, do we need youth workers? This comes up a lot around the world, and it changes all the time. Well, I say, if you're going on a flight to somewhere, if you're going to fly somewhere on an aeroplane, we don't really need stewards, do we? We can get there without stewards. We don't need them. But what kind of airline would expect you to travel without stewards? What would that be? How would that look? Likewise, if we've got a society that can have youth workers and chooses not to have them, what does that say about society? Well, that we can have people that are going to work with young people, work alongside them, accompany them, help them on this transition, get them to explain and explore their world, and to be the inventive and creative human beings that we need and they need for the future. What would a country be who said, no, we're not going to do that? That's the kind of the message that I try to take around everywhere that I've been involved in youth work. And I think that's what I think youth work is.
Okay, some very interesting thoughts in which it really instills reflection upon me as a youth worker. Ms. Teuma, as one of the pioneers of youth work in Malta, what was the inspiration, and maybe even more importantly, the need that you identified that paved the way for the development of youth work as a profession in Malta?
When I was a young girl, and I was learning English, my dad used to sit down next to me and try and make me learn some English idioms or English phrases, which I should use in my compositions. And one which I will always remember, and I think today it's really old, but whilst listening to Brian, I thought of it: birds of the same feathers flock together, because my dad loved birds. And so this was the first one that he said, that's something that you should use when you're writing a composition in an exam. And you should remember my birds, so you will always remember this. And when Brian was talking, I said, I really thought of this because Brian was talking and I'm smiling, and I said, gosh, this is why I get on so well with Brian, it's because what he was saying is really what my belief is. And you have asked me in a way, what has inspired me, what made me go through all this, through these 10 years of the agency, through the lobbying with the government to come up with an agency 10, 15 years ago, you know. I was a teacher, so I loved education. I enjoyed, whenever I was in class, to see students learn, both when I started off as a primary school teacher and even when I lectured at the university. I mean, I love seeing students learn. And I think this is what got me into youth work, because I could see in youth work that this is another kind of learning, a more exciting kind of learning. It's not tied to a curriculum, although I still believe that in a class, learning can be exciting as well. But in a way, I thought that youth work can be an added value to young people, to their an added value to their school journey, an added value to whatever they are getting from school. And I mean, youth work came before me in Malta. I mean, it existed before me. It has always been there in the voluntary organizations and the voluntary organizations that I was working with as well. However, I thought that coming up with something which is provided by the government would really add value to young people's lives. And in reality, that is what has inspired me really to get into this. I stop here because I know that you have a number of questions, and for half an hour talking about this or more.
Yes, maybe we need to increase the time of these live sessions as well.
They end up boring though.
Yes. So in Malta, youth is defined to be the period from 13 till 30 years of age. And just like any other period of life, this is a time in which young people face several challenges and transitions. So, and you already anticipated, Professor Belton, about this, but what is the role of the youth worker in the face of these challenges and transitions? So you made an example out of stewards in the airplane. And in fact, one of my questions was, do we need youth workers in reality for these transitions? But what role do they have to play? We have to play.
Well, I'd love to say this is the role you have to play. This is you're a steward, and to a certain extent you are a steward. You go around and you meet the needs of young people. We want young people. We want this. We want that. But unlike the steward, sometimes a youth worker has to decide not to help. Now, the biggest thing I hear in youth work is it gets confused with social work a lot. And that revolves around that we help young people, and we do, and sometimes we should, but there's a judgment. A social worker has to help. A youth worker doesn't. A youth worker can decide that this is not the best thing sometimes to help. You have to let people, if people fall over, you can help them get up. Yes, you can. I had a very good lesson, if I can take a minute to say this. When I was working in Israel many years ago, they wouldn't let me do anything else. I was terrible at manual work. So they put me in with the nursery, with the nursery nurses. They used to call them meta pellets. That's what they were called. And so I was one of them. And they had a thing that had a place where the kids were playing, and it was a padded area. And the little ones sometimes fell over. So, of course, I was a young man, and as soon as one of them fell over, I was jumping over into the pen, and they said, no, the meta pellets were holding me back. No, stay there. And what you saw is the child cried, and the other children started to help him up. And I learned from that. So sometimes it's good if we're going to organise people in such a way they're going to help each other, that they're going to, so that the youth worker doesn't do it, that we allow the young person to fall over and to get up themselves. But that's a judgment, and that's part of our skill, to make that judgment when to help and when not to help. We're not social workers. We're not big sisters. We're not there as family. We're not their family. Youth workers also sometimes might need to take control. We often talk about we let young people take control. Yes, we do. But it's a matter of judgment. You're the adult in the room. You have a moral and ethical duty, as well as sometimes legal duties in relation to children. We just can't let. When I was young, What I wanted, they say, what did you want as a young person? I wanted a car and a gun. Those are the two things that I wanted. There wasn't a youth worker that could ever help me with that. And so they shouldn't help me with that. They should help. The idea that young people can always take control, again, it's a judgment. And we have to work on the evidence and individual young people. So you are the adult in the room, and by taking and using responsibility as an adult, you can become an example to young people of how they can take responsibility. You do it, the youth worker does this in an intelligent and kind way, and they can provide a useful example of how you take responsibility in life for being an adult. So it's not the youth worker's job to be king of the kids. It's not the youth worker's job to be a streetwise saint. And sometimes young people don't like us very much. The whole idea that they should love us and be lifelong companions to us is not a good idea. They're not our family. They're not our friends. Our professional idea is that these young people can go up and one day, sooner or later, leave us and take on their lives for themselves. A lot of youth workers foster a dependency on young people because they need the young person. They're fulfilling their need. And I understand that, but that's actually unprofessional. So that's my answer to your question. I hope it seems sometimes people it's difficult to take because it's asking you to be a professional, and what defines a professional is the ability to make judgments about what they do and not just do things automatically.
So, Agencia Zaza offers a myriad of programs for different needs. And amongst them, there is a youth work program for young people aged from 16 to 21 years of age, youth.inc, where it looks to work with young people in developing skills to live independently and also skills which will help them find a job. And this program is made up of youth workers. How would you describe, Ms. Teuma, the link between youth work and the development of these skills? Unmute, please.
I thought I will forget this. You mentioned youth.inc, Malcolm, but in reality, all the programs at the agency are youth work programs, and all are there to engage with young people to develop skills. In a way, it's giving them the experience to develop these skills. Brian, in a way, was saying that young people should learn, we should bring the excitement, we should bring the creativity, and so on and so on. And in reality, this learning, this excitement, this creativity, since I've been working with the agency, I have started using, and we have all started using at the agency, sort of that mostly we're working with life skills. So the idea is that the youth worker at the agency, in whatever program he's working in or unit he or she are working in, are trying to work with young people, so to engage them in experiences to develop skills in reality for this transition for life, be it work, their education, school. So that's which moves from school and after school or after compulsory schooling, we are really trying to engage the young people to further their learning in a fun and excited way, in a way.
Yes. We have all been talking about youth work and maybe the role of youth worker. And something that I wanted to put forward in this live session is the perception of young people. And these are, I've collected three narratives from young people, all from different services that different programs. And these are what they've said. And I would like to reflect a little and maybe get your reaction about how they describe a youth worker. So The first one is a youth worker is someone who might seem scary at first. Maybe you think they are there to control the situation and tell you what to do, to be your boss. Actually, the opposite is true. In my experience, all the youth workers I have had the pleasure to meet have supported me, so I could grab the reins in my own hands, while being there to prevent us from falling and help us get up if we do. Someone to be your number one cheerleader, which encourages you to believe in you, helps you make your dreams a reality, while looking out for you and opening your eyes to some things you cannot see. Another um, uh, narration is a youth worker is someone who is present to talk with young people, not just about school, but whatever we want to talk about, sometimes even about personal matters. The youth worker also looks to organize and participate in activities for us young people. And lastly, youth workers were my second family. Even today, that I no longer participate at Youth.Inc., I am still in contact with youth workers. And I don't know um, uh, your reactions. I think the last one in particular, I think if I can anticipate, maybe even Professor Belton, where he talked about the family aspect. Um, uh, but this what the young person perceived from his situation. So is that wrong in a way? Doesn't mean maybe he had a sense of belonging through his experience.
I don't think it's wrong. I mean, you can't. People's view is what people's view is. I think, for me, I think that if they've seen a youth worker in doing it this way, yeah, I mean, you can't see that as anything but you can't see that as negative. But you mentioned organising, and you see, I can organise anyone, but then my mum can organise anyone. I mean, a youth worker is making a judgment sometimes when they won't organise. You know, the idea that a young person wants me to organise something. See, when I see youth work working, it's when the youth worker's been able to manage the young people to organise themselves. You know, and sometimes they don't want to do it; they want you to do it. And it's this idea: I'm not going to do it; you need to do it. And then and it's working through that. Now, that means that the young person doesn't feel terribly positive about you because they want a entertainment officer, or they want a servant, or that's what happens at home. But this is not the way to adulthood, because when they go into the world of work or to study, they will be expected to organise themselves. There won't be a youth worker there to organise things to keep them happy. They will have to organise themselves to keep themselves happy. You see, you cannot do this all the time because it turns you into a childminder. What that person is actually experiencing or as described is someone who keeps them happy, which is a childminder or an entertainment officer. You have to make the judgment, and that's the difficult bit. The idea, that's what defines a youth worker professionally, not what they go out and organise for young people, but what they can get organised, what they can get young people organising for themselves. We've got to be careful about cultivating dependency. You see, this is how tyranny starts in a society. This is what I mean about social and political education. If we make a society that is waiting for someone to organise things for them, who cannot decide for themselves what they want, we're creating an idea of dependency. Now, the truth is we are not family. You're not going to invite these children to grandpa's funeral, are you? They're not going to come to your mum's anniversary party. So to pretend that they're your friend and then set this up that I am somehow your friend, can I come round on Christmas Day? Can I come, you know, you said you were my friend. Well, you're not much of a friend if you decide what happens in the friendship, are you? See, so if you're a friend, they have to be able to ask things of you as they ask of a friend. Well, that's not the relationship. And that if you are cultivating that relationship, there is a problem. It creates a problem. It creates an expectation in the child that you will do things like their parents and their brothers and their sisters, and you're not that. So we have to be careful about what's appropriate. We need to be looking to young people to become autonomous adults. And that is sometimes a painful thing to do. That's sometimes they're going to get the right misery with us because I am not going to do this for you. I want you to do it. It's the same with working with youth workers. They want, you make the decision. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I might be critical of your decision though. So I think whatever that young person's seeing, they're not seeing what I would see as youth work.
I don't know, maybe if Ms. Teuma, you can give us your reactions to these quotes.
I want to, in a way, sort of respond a little bit to Brian and used to what I was saying with the idea that I have been using life skills for the past few years, because for me it's the social and political education, and creating autonomous learners in a way is also the most important thing. And in a way, in a practical way, I've changed this into my mind for people more to understand by using the word life skills. Because in reality, if you're engaging, or if a young person, through your accompaniment, through you being there, is learning more the skill on how to live independently, how to act in a society, how to act politically, these are the skills that, in a way, youth workers should not be giving just by giving an instruction, but by enabling the young person to pass through experiences, and the youth worker being there. I mean, again, when I hear these what the young people say, I can't really say this right or this wrong. I mean, these are what the young people were feeling. I mean, some of them are showing satisfaction to what to the youth workers. Yes, why not? I mean, and it gives them a good feeling. When I hear it, it does give me a good feeling, but it also enables me to reflect that youth workers collectively need to reflect more, need to train themselves more, need to think more about what they're doing to make things better, and to be better youth workers and more professional youth workers. I'm not saying that they aren't, but unless the journey stops, our achievements will stop. So, I mean, I think this is listening to what young people say. It's not there to give us satisfaction, but to enable us reflect, to see what we can do better. So yes, it's good to listen to what young people are saying and what they think about youth workers, because that is what will make us better if we evaluate that and reflect on it.
Exactly, and I think youth work, I think similar to other social professions, but at least my experiences in youth work, it doesn't really come with a manual on what you have to do. So you need to reflect a lot. You have to learn even by our mistakes to see how we can how we can evolve our service to the young people we have in front of us. So in the very last part, we're going to discuss a little about COVID-19. And now I have to ask you that we have to try to be as short as possible. So basically, COVID-19 brought many challenges to all social professionals. Was this a wake-up call that youth work needs to evolve? And I don't know what you, Professor Belton, you think about this. Maybe was youth work lagging behind?
I don't know. I mean, what I've seen worldwide really is quite heartening. That what youth work seems to been able to do is adapt. And I think, I don't know about, is it a wake-up call? Because youth work has always adapted. This has been the strength of youth work. You say it comes without a manual, and you're correct. But what it has been able to do is be able to adapt to the needs of young people and the societies in which those young people are part, and what they go through. And the pandemic is part of that. So that's the strength of youth work, that it's been able to adapt. And it's surprising that youth workers there's some agencies that are making more contacts now in the pandemic than they did before. They're actually finding ways to engage with young people that they never had before. So it's this adaptability. In fact, the pandemic has shown that, if anything, the strength of youth work, in my experience anyway, because it has been able to adapt. it hasn't changed very much in terms of we are involved in world building. Now, what the pandemic has also done is made young people more, I think, more aware of how the world is one place. It isn't cut off. It isn't just Malta or Britain or this pandemic has affected everybody. And I think that's something that is positive that's come out of the pandemic, is that it's been able to see that. And that young people are involved and they can see themselves involved in working towards making a world that's in their image, that is the world that they want to live in. And I have seen this going on around the world. Now, if we don't do that, if we don't create a world that these young people will see as a better, more peaceful, more colourful, more exciting, more prosperous world, they will hate that world. And instead of trying to make it, they will want to destroy it. Now, you see that in a lot of young people in the radical situation, in terrorist movements, that we've learnt them, they have learnt, and we have taught them to hate the world they live in, and they want to destroy it. So what we've got, because we're making these more contacts, and because of the pandemic, and given the pandemic has given us a sense of more of a one world, we now have a chance as youth workers to use this to show young people and to work with young people how they make the new reality. So I think the pandemic is a terrible thing, and it's caused terrible pain and fear, but there is something that positive that's come out of it.
Yes, and I think to add with your point, I think as Agencia Zaza, I think not only we adapted in a way our services through digital mediums, but we also it paved way for new services as well. And my question for Ms. Teuma is that has this pandemic provided us with a scenario of a new digital youth work? Is it the new normal that youth work has to be done through digital means?
Well, I at the beginning of the pandemic, I mean, we were talking about the new norm. This new norm probably will never be really a new norm. I mean, it's things that people make. I'm realizing it's things that people make up, but because people will still continue interacting, that's human nature. People will still need to hug each other one day, shake hands. I mean, this is not something that probably we will do that again. So this is not a question of really having a norm, but definitely I do believe, Malcolm, that in the agency, the pandemic made us act rather than react. And that is what I really like about all the staff at the agency and the youth workers working there. Many times when crisis happens, we react to them. And I have seen in other countries in Europe, everybody's trying to react and trying to lobby them to get more money to react to what is happening and so on. And that is not the way youth work should be. I mean, and that is why I'm really happy that in the agency we really acted in the pandemic, reflected, and became more creative. And through the creative action that we have taken, we have come up with new ideas and new ways of doing things. And ultimately, probably, when this pandemic is over, we will do both, because we would have learned new ways, and then we'll ultimately get a hybrid to do both. I mean, this program of yours, it was in a way your idea with the help of others and with the help of the people who are working with you. You continued working with it, and this has not become a program which is reacting to the pandemic, but which is acting in the pandemic, but will continue acting when the pandemic is over as well. So I think that's the positive thing that the pandemic brought to the agency, and I hope that this will continue.
Yes. This is all the time we had today. I think it was a really interesting discussion, and I must be honest, it made me appreciate more our profession. Because the fact that there are so many different opinions, the fact that there are even some disagreements sometimes, I think it makes this profession even more special. Usually, I end my live session with a quote related to the topic. Today, I'm going to end with two quotes from two youth workers. So, what the first one is: the youth worker is not there to do young people's work. The youth worker is the scaffolding around the young person. She or he is present if the young people need support. And another perspective of youth work is that youth work is about empowering young people. It opens the door to a wide range of opportunities that enable them to learn new skills and that help them reach their full potential. It is about being with young people, creating safe spaces, building relationships, and giving young people a voice to make a change within their communities and society. I would like to thank both Professor Belton and Ms.Miriam Teuma for joining me for today's live session. We'll be live once again next week for another uh, interesting discussion. I thank you all and wish you all to stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. Well done.